I took the job because the email looked like every other email. Encrypted sender, no subject line, just a time and a peer number and a PDF attached. The PDF had an NDA in it that I had to sign and return within 2 hours. Standard stuff. The client wasn't named anywhere in it, just the contracting party. Which in my experience means either the Navy or someone who wants you to think it's the Navy. Either way, same rules apply. You show up, you do the work, you don't talk about it afterward. I'd been doing commercial dive work out of Long Beach for 8 years by then. Hull inspections, mostly. Some salvage. All through Curtin Maritime, which is one of those companies that does a lot of government contracts and doesn't put much on their website. My normal jobs were boring in the best way. Go down, check the hull plating for corrosion, photograph whatever looked wrong, come back up, file the report. Nobody was ever in a hurry, and nobody ever handed me a laminated card. That part came later. The pier number in the email put me at Naval Base San Diego, which I'd worked out of twice before. I drove down from Long Beach the night before and stayed at a Motel 6 off Rosecrans, the one near the Denny's. I couldn't sleep great. Not because I was nervous, just because the AC unit rattled every time it cycled on, and I'm a light sleeper. I read most of a Field and Stream I found under the bed and then stared at the ceiling until my alarm went off at 5. I got to the pier at 6:45. The boat was already there. The Pacific Provider was smaller than I expected, maybe 90 feet. Gray hull, no markings. It looked like a utility vessel, nothing special. There was dive equipment staged on the stern deck and a cable winch bolted to the aft rail that hadn't been there from the factory. Someone had added it. I noticed that. I kept walking. A woman in a Navy windbreaker was standing at the gangway with a clipboard. That was Lexi Santos. She looked at me the way you look at a piece of gear you're not sure passed inspection. "Webster," she said. Not a question. "Yeah." She checked something on the clipboard and then looked at my bag. "Open it." I opened it. She went through it without touching anything, just looked. Checked the regulator, checked the dive computer, looked at my fins. She didn't say what she was looking for. When she was done, she straightened up and handed the clipboard to someone behind her I hadn't noticed. "You're replaceable," she said. "I want you to know that going in. If you can't follow instructions exactly as given, I will pull you off this boat and your contract pays out at 20%. Clear?" "Clear," I said. That was it. She walked back up the gangway and I followed her. I'm not easily rattled. That's not me being tough. It's just that 8 years of commercial diving selects for a certain kind of person, and I'm that kind. You get comfortable with the idea that something could go wrong, and you just deal with it when it does. But Lexi Santos had this way of talking that made you feel like she'd already run the numbers on you, and you'd come up short. Not mean about it, just certain. I found Bradley Moore on the stern deck, sitting on a gear crate with a length of paracord in his hands. He was tying knots. Not any particular knot in sequence, just tying and untying, tying and untying. He had a faded Curtin Maritime crew shirt on and the kind of dive boots that have been resoled at least once. "Webster," he said. "Lewis," I said. "Bradley." He looked at the paracord, then back at me. "You done work like this before?" "Depends what this is." He nodded, like that was a reasonable answer, and went back to his knots. I sat down on the crate next to him, and we didn't talk much after that. The boat left the pier at 7:15. It was already warm, and the sky was that flat white gray it gets in June before the marine layer burns off. San Diego slid away behind us, and we went past Point Loma and out toward open water. Bradley was good with his hands. I watched him tie a bowline one-handed without looking. That takes practice. He wasn't nervous the way some guys are nervous, talking too much and laughing at nothing. He was nervous the way a person is when they're trying to hold something still inside themselves. The knot tying was doing something for him. I didn't ask what. Lexi Santos found us about an hour out. She had a laminated card in her hand, the kind of thing you laminate when you want it to survive water. She held it out to me. "Read it," she said. I read it. 5 rules, numbered, printed in a clean sans serif font. No header, no explanation of context. 1. Never dive after sunset. 2. Keep the faceplate down near any reflective surface underwater. 3. If you hear your own name through comms and the surface supervisor does not confirm within 5 seconds, cut audio for 60 seconds. 4. If any object comes up too clean, no growth, no silt, no corrosion, do not touch it barehanded. 5. If a diver goes missing below 180 feet, do not go after him. I read it once and looked up. Lexi Santos was watching me. "Again?" she said. I read it again. Bradley read it after me. He didn't say anything when he handed the card back. His hands went back to the paracord. I had questions. I didn't ask them. Partly because Lexi Santos had already made clear that questions weren't really the format here, and partly because I was still working through the rules in my head and trying to figure out what kind of situation produces a list like that. Rule 3 was the one that stuck. Hearing your own name through comms was specific enough that someone had written it down for a reason. I told myself it was just a black box. That's what I called it in my head. Black box jobs. Something classified sank. The Navy wants it back. They hire commercial divers because it's faster than running it through official channels. I'd done 2 of those before. One was a sensor pod off a P8, nothing interesting. The other was a container of something I was told not to look at directly, and I didn't. Both times I got paid well, and nothing bad happened. I kept that track record in mind. The mission briefing, such as it was, came from Lexi Santos over coffee in the small galley below deck. The test article, she called it a test article, never said what it tested, had gone down in a Navy training range during an exercise 3 weeks prior. It was sitting at around 172 feet in sand, and attached to it was a pressure case with classified instrumentation inside. Our job was to recover the case. The test article itself was to be left in place. The Navy would handle disposal separately. Simple. Routine. The kind of job where the weirdest thing is usually the NDA. I poured the rest of my coffee out in the sink and went back up to the stern deck. Bradley was there, sitting with his back against the winch housing, still working the paracord. The water out here was darker than it looked closer to shore. Deeper green, almost gray. "You ever do a black box job?" I asked him. "Once," he said. "Off Catalina. Easy." "Yeah," I said. "Usually are." He nodded and tied a figure 8 and pulled it tight and then started working it loose again. I watched the water for a while. The Pacific Provider's engines ran at a steady low hum, and the deck vibrated a little under my boots. San Clemente Island was out there somewhere ahead of us, still below the horizon. I thought about Rule 5, the one about not going after a diver below 180. Then I stopped thinking about it and went to check my gear. We found the buoy at noon exactly. It was just a standard range marker, orange and white, bobbing on a short tether. Nothing special about it. The Pacific Provider slowed, and Leo came up from below decks, wiping his hands on a rag, said the ROV was ready if Lexi wanted a look before we suited up. Lexi said yes. That was it. Leo's setup was in the forward cabin, which was cramped and smelled like solder and old coffee. He had 2 monitors mounted on a folding table with a bunch of zip-tied cables running back through a port in the hull. The ROV itself was already in the water, tethered off the port side. I'd worked with ROV pilots before, but Leo was quieter than most. He sat down, cracked his knuckles once, and started working the controls without saying anything. Bradley stood next to me. He wasn't tying knots anymore. He had his arms crossed and he was watching the monitor. The feed came up grainy at first, then cleared. 150 feet, 160. The seafloor out here was flat sand with some low rock outcroppings. Visibility was decent, maybe 30 feet in the camera's light cone. At 172 feet, the ROV's lights caught the test article. It was torpedo-shaped, blunt-nosed, maybe 20 feet long, sitting perfectly upright in the sand, no markings anywhere on it. I looked for a serial number, a stencil, a paint code, anything. Nothing. The hull was smooth and gray and clean. "That's it," Leo said. The pressure case was right beside it, sitting separate from the main body like it had been set down carefully. Gray composite housing, maybe 18 inches long, single latch on the front face. I could see the latch from here. "Case looks intact," Leo said. He zoomed in a little. "Latch is closed." Lexi was standing behind him with her arms crossed, glasses on, watching the screen. "Pan left," she said. Leo panned left. That's when we all saw the third thing. It was a person, or the shape of one, wedged under a crossbar on the lower section of the test article, arms at its sides, feet together. Navy dress whites, full uniform. The white jacket, the dark shoulder boards, the ribbon bar on the chest. White trousers, black shoes. The shoes were shiny. Not kind of shiny. Actually shiny, like someone had just polished them that morning. Nobody said anything for a second. The uniform wasn't torn. It wasn't tangled. It wasn't floating loose the way fabric does underwater. It was pressed. The creases on the trousers were still there. The buttons caught the ROV light and threw it back clean. "How long has that been down there?" Bradley said. Not really a question. "Unknown," Lexi said. "That uniform looks like it's been down there about an hour," I said. "I know what it looks like," Lexi said. "We're not there for the body. We recover the case and we ascend. The body is not our problem." I looked at the screen a little longer. The figure's face was turned slightly toward the ROV camera. I couldn't make out features at that resolution. Leo zoomed in, and the image pixelated, and Lexi told him to zoom back out. "Mark the coordinates," she said. "I'll report the body to the contracting officer after we're back in port." That was the whole conversation about it. Leo marked the coordinates. Lexi walked out. Bradley uncrossed his arms and looked at me. "That uniform's not right," he said quietly. "No," I said. "I mean the condition of it." "I know what you mean," I said. We suited up on the stern deck. The cage was already rigged, a standard two-man steel cage clipped to the main cable with a secondary safety line running through a separate sheave. Bradley checked his regulator twice. I checked mine once and then checked his because he was checking his too many times. Lexi handed us the hook tool for the latch, a fiberglass-handled pole with a stainless catch on the end. She reminded us not to touch the case bare-handed. I reminded her I'd read the card. She said good. The cage went in at 12:42. The descent was slow. The cable fed out smooth and the cage dropped steady. The water was dark green at the surface and went blue-black fast. Bradley had his light on and I had mine, and the cage frame threw long shadows in every direction. At 50 feet, the surface was already just a pale smear above us. At 100 feet, it was gone. I've done a lot of dives. The descent is usually the boring part. You watch your depth gauge, you equalize, you check your partner. That's it. This one felt longer than it was. I kept my eyes on the depth gauge and on Bradley and on the gauge again. 172 feet. The cage bumped sand and settled. The test article was right there, maybe 20 feet off. The ROV footage hadn't lied. It was sitting perfectly upright, perfectly still. But on the monitor it had looked like a clean piece of equipment. Down here it looked wrong in a way I couldn't immediately name. I floated there for a second, trying to figure out what it was. No growth. Nothing. Not a single barnacle on the hull. No algae, no silt ring around the base where it met the sand, no marine snow collecting on the flat surfaces. Every piece of equipment I'd ever worked around at depth had something on it. Rust bloom, biofouling, sediment. This thing looked like it had been placed here this morning. Like the shoes. I checked my bubbles. They went sideways. Not up, sideways. Sliding off to the right in a slow, flat sheet and then dispersing. Bradley saw it too. "Current," he said through the comms. I didn't say anything. There wasn't enough current down here to move bubbles like that. I'd have felt it on my body. We moved toward the case. Bradley had the hook tool. I kept my light on the pressure case and watched where I put my hands on the cage rail. The test article's hull was close now, maybe 6 feet. Still no markings. I ran my light along the length of it looking for anything. A serial block, a weld seam, an access panel. The hull was smooth all the way. The pressure case was right there beside it, sitting in the sand. I looked left for the body. It had moved. When we came down, the figure in dress whites was wedged under the crossbar, facing the test article. Now it was facing us, rotated maybe 90 degrees, still wedged under the bar, arms still at its sides. The face was turned our direction. I could see the eyes now. They were open and glassy and pale, and they were pointed at my light. I watched them for a second. The eyes didn't move, but they were aimed at me, directly at my light. I didn't say anything to Bradley about it. He was already working, positioning the hook tool over the latch. I kept my peripheral vision on the body and watched Bradley line up the catch. "Ready," Bradley said. "Go," I said. He set the hook and pulled. The latch popped with a clean mechanical click, the kind of sound that shouldn't carry that well underwater, but did. The case lid lifted a centimeter on its hinge. Every light on the test article came on at once. Not a power-up sequence, not a flicker. All of them, simultaneously. Red and white indicator lights along the hull, a blue strip running the length of the underside, a single bright white beam from the nose pointing straight up into the water column. The whole thing just lit up like someone had been waiting for us to open that latch. Bradley pulled the hook tool back and held it against his chest. I kept my eyes on the body in the dress whites. Its mouth was closed. The buttons were still bright. The shoes were still shiny. The lights on the test article stayed on. The static hit both of us at the same time. I could tell because Bradley flinched, his whole body going stiff the way it does when a sound cuts through your helmet unexpectedly. It wasn't loud. That was the thing. It was low and close, like it was already inside the equipment rather than coming through it. And then I heard my name. Not Lexi's voice. Not Bradley's. Mine. My own voice. The exact way it sounds on a voicemail I'd leave myself. That flat Southern California cadence I've heard on recordings and never quite recognized as me. It said my name once, clearly, and then the static swallowed it back up. I waited for Lexi to confirm. She didn't say anything. I cut audio. 60 seconds. That was the rule, and I'd read the rule twice off a laminated card, so I followed it without thinking about it too hard. I clicked the switch on the left side of my helmet and the comms went dead, and suddenly the only thing I could hear was my own breathing and the faint mechanical hiss of the regulator. 60 seconds is longer than you think at 170 feet. I kept my eyes moving. The test article was still lit up, all of it. That blue strip running the underside, the red and white indicators, the white beam from the nose cutting straight up through the water above us. Bradley was a few feet to my left, holding the hook tool against his chest. I could see his eyes behind the faceplate. He was watching the body in the dress whites. I looked at the body too. It was still far, maybe 12 feet back, the same position it had been when we first came down, wedged under that crossbar. I'd clocked the distance when we arrived, and I was clocking it again now. 12 feet, same spot. I kept my light on it and watched and counted seconds in my head. My counting's not reliable under pressure, I'll admit that, but I was trying. Around 40 seconds in, I looked at Bradley. He was still watching the body. His grip on the hook tool had tightened. I could see it in his knuckles. I looked back at the body. It was closer. I don't know how else to say it. I didn't see it move. There was no motion, no displacement of water, no silt kicked up from the sand. It was just closer. Maybe 6 feet now. Still wedged in the same position, same posture, same unwrinkled uniform, but closer. The shoes were right there. I could see the laces. I kept counting. When I hit 60, I clicked the comms back on. "Did you move it?" Bradley was already talking, his voice high and tight. "Lewis, did you move the body? It's right there, it's right there. Did you?" "No," I said. "I didn't touch it. It was over there, it was way over there." "I know." Bradley went quiet. We both looked at it. The body's eyes were open. They'd been open the whole time, glassy and fixed, but now they were tracking. Not staring in one direction. Tracking. My light moved a few inches to the left and the eyes followed it. I moved it right and they followed that too. Slow, deliberate. The way a camera gimbal moves when it's following a target. Then the mouth opened. It didn't open like a person's mouth opens. No muscle movement in the jaw, no tension in the face. It just opened, straight down, like a hinge. And water came out. Not a gush, not a flood. A steady, controlled stream pouring out from the inside of the mouth in a thin column that hit the sand below and scattered. It kept going. The same rate, the same pressure, like something inside was operating a valve and had set it to a specific flow. That part bugged me a little. Lexi's voice came through sharp. "Clip the case to the lift bag. You need to leave." I was already reaching for the lift bag on the cage rail. Bradley didn't move. He was staring at the body, the hook tool hanging loose in one hand now. "Bradley." Nothing. "Bradley, get the clip." He turned and looked at me, and his eyes were fine. He was in there. He heard me. He nodded once and moved toward the case. We didn't make it. The nose of the test article split open. I felt it before I saw it. A low vibration through the water. A pressure change that hit my chest and made me think for half a second that something had detonated. Then the seam appeared, running clean along the blunt nose from top to bottom, and the two halves folded back like they'd been waiting to do that for a long time. What was behind them was a ring. Metal, maybe 3 feet across, shaped like an iris, with overlapping segments arranged in a circle. The edges were machined and precise. Behind the ring was black water. Not dark water, black. The kind of black that doesn't reflect anything. I pointed my light directly at it, and the beam just stopped. Like the light hit a surface and didn't come back. I couldn't see a bottom, couldn't see a wall, couldn't see anything. It looked like a shaft going down forever. I heard Lexi say something, but I wasn't processing it. A second cage dropped from above. I heard the cable before I saw it, the same sound our cage made on the way down, that low metallic rattle. I looked up and there it was, identical to ours, same frame, same dimensions, same rigging. Coming down at the same speed ours had descended, and inside it was a diver. Same suit as mine, same fins, same configuration. Faceplate up. I slammed mine down, hard. Both latches, checked them twice. I don't know if that was the right call. I just did it. The rule said, keep the faceplate down near reflective surfaces, and that ring was metal, and I wasn't thinking past that. Bradley didn't move. He was looking at the second cage. Just looking at it, completely still, the hook tool down at his side. I couldn't read his face well through the faceplate, but his posture had changed. The restlessness was gone. He'd been moving constantly since we hit the water, adjusting his grip, checking his gauges, the way he always was. Now he was completely still. "Bradley." He didn't respond. "Bradley, faceplate now." "That's my mom," he said. His voice was calm. That was the part that got me. Not scared, not confused. Calm. The way he sounded when he was narrating something he was doing with his hands, just stating a fact. "That's not your mom," I said. "She's right there. She's looking at me." The second cage had stopped maybe 10 feet above us, hovering. The figure inside it wasn't moving either. Just standing there, faceplate up, whatever was behind it pointed at Bradley. "Your mom's not a diver," I said. I don't know why I said that. It was a stupid thing to say. But it was true, and I was out of better options. Bradley unclipped from the rail. He didn't lunge, didn't rush. He just reached down, unclipped the carabiner from his harness, and let himself drift, slow, toward the ring, toward the second cage. His fins barely moved, just enough to keep him oriented, like he was being pulled by something very patient. I grabbed him, both hands, full grip on his harness straps, and I pulled. He was 165 pounds of dead weight drifting toward a hole in the ocean floor, and I had maybe 3 seconds before the current or whatever was doing the pulling got him past the point where I could do anything useful. He shoved me. Not stumbled into me, not flailed. Shoved. One arm came back and hit me in the chest with enough force that I let go and floated back 2 feet before I caught the cage rail. I've had guys twice Bradley's size push me around on deck, and it didn't feel like that. That was something else. I don't know what to call it. I'm not going to call it anything. The dress white's body was there before I could get my grip back. It moved the way it always moved. No visible effort, no current, just suddenly closer than it had been. It put one hand on Bradley's visor, flat palm, deliberate, like it was checking his temperature. The jelly smear it left was clear, almost invisible, just a slight drag across the glass. Bradley's arms dropped. His whole body went slack at once, not gradual, just off. He sank like his tanks had doubled in weight, and his fins stopped moving entirely. I went after him. I didn't think about the rules. I didn't think about Lexi. I unclipped my safety lanyard from the cage rail, and I went after him. And I got one hand on his shoulder D-ring and clipped it before I really registered that I'd done it. The lanyard went taut between us. He was still sinking. I was getting dragged. And for a second I was just watching my depth gauge tick down, 175, 178, while I tried to get my fins under me and kick back toward the cage. The ring was right there. I could see it without looking for it. The iris-shaped seam, the black inside it, the black that didn't look like water. I kicked hard and the lanyard went rigid and Bradley's weight transferred, and I got us both stopped at about 181 feet, which was 9 feet past where I was supposed to be, and also 9 feet from the edge of whatever that thing opened into. I looked inside. I didn't mean to. I was just trying to find something to hook onto, and my light swept across the opening, and I saw them. Tags. Hundreds of them, maybe more. Metal, rectangular, the kind that go on a key ring. They were spinning, all of them, slow and even, like they were suspended in something that rotated. Each one had text on it. I couldn't read most of them from where I was, but I could read the format. Name, then a number. I knew that number format. Curtin Maritime issues employee numbers in that format. 8 digits, starts with a 2. I looked away. I got my fins against the outer rim of the ring, not inside, on the rim, and I pushed off hard and hauled Bradley with me. The lanyard cut into my hand through the glove. We came up off the bottom in a slow arc, both of us swinging toward the cage, and I grabbed the rail with my free hand and got my arm through the bars and held on. Lexi triggered the winch before I could signal her. The cable jerked and we went up fast, faster than a normal ascent, and I kept my arm through the cage bar and held Bradley's lanyard and tried to breathe even, because going up that fast on a compressed breath is how you end up with a lung that looks like a popped balloon. I made myself exhale slow. Bradley was just hanging below me, completely out, rotating slightly from the ascent current. At 60 feet, I got him into the cage properly, got his arm through the bar, and rode the rest of the way up with my hand on his chest to make sure it was moving. It was. We broke surface at around 2 in the afternoon. The sky was white and flat, and the Pacific Provider's deck crew had the crane arm out before we were fully up. 2 guys I didn't know by name got Bradley onto the deck while I unclipped from the cage and climbed out on my own. My legs felt wrong. Not weak, just wrong, like the signals were running a half-second behind. The pressure case was already on deck. It had come up on the lift bag at some point during the ascent, dry as if it had never been under water. I picked it up without thinking. It was too light. Not empty light, but wrong light, like something had been removed from inside it and replaced with air. Whatever the Navy actually needed out of that test article, it wasn't in here. I set it down and went to Bradley. He was on his back, helmet off, eyes closed. His chest was moving, slow and regular, like he was asleep. I pulled his hood back to check his neck because that's what you do after a dive incident. You check for barotrauma, you check the skin. 3 slits, just below his jaw on each side and 1 lower near his collarbone. Clean edges, no blood, no swelling. They opened and closed. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. Like breathing, but not. I pulled his hood back up. I stood up and walked to the rail and looked at the water for a while. It was blue-green and flat, and there was nothing visible below the surface. No cage, no ring, no test article. Just water. Lexi was on her phone. She'd been on it since we came up. She had her back to the crew, one hand pressed against her other ear, which meant the wind was up or she didn't want anyone to hear the other end of the call. Probably both. I watched her for a minute. She didn't look at Bradley. She didn't look at me. She just talked. Leo was at his monitor with the ROV screen dark, writing something on a clipboard. He glanced at me once and I looked away. Lexi finished the call and walked over. She looked at Bradley, then at me. "Navy wants the ring sealed," she said. "Not recovered, not studied. Sealed." I waited. ROV lost signal near the seam. It's not going back in range before dark. She looked at the sky. That means a diver. I already knew what she was going to say next. "Sunset's in 3 hours," she said. That was it. That was the whole conversation. She didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't ask what happened down there. Didn't ask about the tags or the body or the jelly on Bradley's visor that I was trying not to think about. She just handed me the new problem and waited. I looked at Bradley. His chest was still moving. His hood was up. 3 hours to sunset. Rule 1 said no diving after dark. And I was the only diver left standing on this boat. "Shape charge?" I said. "Already being prepped," she said. The charge pack weighed about 12 pounds. Lexi handed it to me in a hard plastic case with a yellow handle, the kind that looks like it should have fishing tackle inside. The detonator was already wired. She showed me the trigger sequence on a laminated card. Same format as the rules card from before, same laminator, probably same printer. I figured she had a whole stack of those somewhere. I didn't ask questions. I just checked the pack, checked the hook tool on my belt, and started suiting up. It was 4:25 when I got back into the water. 4:40 by the time I hit depth. I kept the faceplate locked from the surface. Didn't wait until I was near anything reflective. I just locked it on deck and left it. Lexi watched me do it and didn't say anything. Leo didn't look up from his clipboard. I cut audio before I hit the water. The silence was immediate and total. Just my own breathing and the hiss of the regulator and the sound the bubbles made going up past my ears. The descent felt longer the second time. I don't know if it actually was. Probably wasn't. But the first time I'd had Bradley next to me in the cage, something to look at, something to track. This time it was just me on the cable, the charge pack clipped to my left hip, the hook tool in my right hand, and 170 feet of dark water between me and whatever was waiting at the bottom. The seafloor came up slow. I kept my eyes on the cable and my depth gauge and didn't look around until I had both feet on sand. The test article was still there, still clean, still no barnacles, no silt, no sign anything had happened. The pressure case was gone. That was the one thing missing. Everything else was exactly where we'd left it. The ring was open in the nose of the article, the iris-shaped seam pulled back, and the black behind it was still there. Still looked like it went down forever. The dress white's body was standing beside it, not wedged under the crossbar anymore, standing upright. Feet on the sand, arms at its sides, facing me. The uniform was still pristine. The shoes were still shiny. The eyes were open, and they moved when I moved. tracking my light the same way they had before. I kept my breathing even. That's the job. You keep your breathing even. I didn't look at it directly. I looked at the ring. I looked at the outer rim, figured out the best anchor point for the charge, and started moving toward it in a wide arc that kept me away from the body. It rotated to follow me, slow, like it was on a lazy Susan. That part bugged me a little. The hook tool was for the latch on the pressure case, but it worked fine for positioning the charge pack without bare metal contact. I got close to the rim, close enough that I could see the edge clearly, and I found a bracket on the outer housing. A bolt flange, looked structural. And I hooked the charge pack to it. Took about 45 seconds. The pack clicked into place. I ran the detonator wire back along the rim and clipped it clear of the seam so it wouldn't get pinched if the ring moved. The body hadn't moved closer. It was just watching. I backed off the ring, put some distance between me and the article, and restored comms. Lexi's voice came in mid-sentence. "Losing daylight. Webster, confirm position." "Charge is set," I said. "On the outer rim, bolt flange, port side of the seam." "Copy. Detonator clear?" "Clear." Brief pause. "You have about 40 minutes before I'm pulling you up regardless." "Understood." I was already checking my tether. Standard umbilical, clipped to my shoulder D-ring and running back up to the cage line. I had about 30 feet of slack, enough to work. I started moving back toward the cage, keeping the ring in my peripheral. That's when it flexed. Not a big movement, just a pulse, like something took a breath behind it. The iris seam widened maybe 2 inches, and then the edge of the ring, the outer physical edge, the metal housing, clamped sideways onto my tether. Not tangled, clamped. Like a hand closing. I pulled. The tether held tight. I pulled harder and felt the cable go taut all the way up to the cage. I looked at the ring. The edge had a grip on about 8 inches of my line. The metal had bent around it, which metal doesn't do, but there it was. I could see the detonator wire still clear of the seam. The charge was still in place. That was something. I looked at the tether. Then I looked at the ring. Then I saw the tags. They were spinning again inside the black. Same as before, thousands of them catching the light in quick silver flashes. I hadn't meant to look directly into it. I looked away fast, but not before I saw one of them clearly. It was close to the edge, closer than the others, spinning slower. I could read it. Bradley Moore. His employee number under it. Curtin Maritime Standard Format. Same as the ID badge he'd worn on deck that morning. I looked away. My chest felt tight, and that wasn't the pressure. I had the hook tool in my hand. I looked at the tether clip on my shoulder, D-ring. Standard carabiner, screw gate, 3/4 inch. I'd clipped and unclipped it probably 1,000 times. I unclipped it. The tether went slack against the ring, and I was free of it. No safety line. Just me and the water and the charge pack sitting on the rim 30 feet away with a detonator I hadn't triggered yet. I kicked hard toward open water, angling up and away from the article. Behind me I heard, not through comms, just through the water itself, through the pressure, a sound like something large moving fast. I didn't look back. 8 years of commercial diving and the one rule I made up myself. Don't look back at the thing you're running from. Something brushed my fin. Right fin, outer edge. A touch, light, like a finger. I kicked harder. I hit the detonator. The charge went off and the shock wave hit me like a wall. It wasn't the air out of my lungs and punched through my chest, and I tumbled maybe 15 feet in the water column before I got my orientation back. My ears were ringing inside the helmet. My depth gauge said 90 feet and I was still moving up. I didn't fight it. I just kept kicking. The water below me went dark. Not the normal dark. A different kind, like something closing. Then it was just regular ocean again, dark the way deep water is dark, and I was at 60 feet and then 40, and then I could see the bottom of the hull above me, and the surface was orange through the water, the whole sky orange, and I came up into it. I pulled my faceplate up and just floated there for a second. The Pacific Provider was maybe 30 feet away. The sky was the color of a traffic cone. My chest hurt where the shockwave had hit it. Lexi was at the rail. She was looking at her watch, not at me. "Webster," she said. "Yeah," I said. "Get out of the water." I swam to the ladder and climbed up. Lexi was already at the sonar station by the time I got my helmet off. She didn't look up. She had a folding table set up near the stern with a laptop and a portable transducer unit plugged into it, and she was watching the screen like it owed her something. The display showed the seafloor in green and gray, a lot of debris scatter where the ring used to be. She kept watching it. I sat down on a gear locker and just breathed for a while. My chest still hurt. Not sharp, more like a deep bruise that hadn't decided how bad it was going to be yet. I unzipped my dry suit halfway and let the cold air in, and that helped a little. Leo was somewhere behind me. I could hear him doing something with the ROV cables, coiling them maybe. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. Lexi watched the sonar for maybe 20 minutes. I timed it against the sun dropping. The sky went from orange to pink to that flat gray-purple you get right before dark. She finally straightened up, clicked something on the laptop, and said, "Seafloor's clear." "Okay," I said. She looked at me then, just for a second. I don't know what she was looking for. She looked back at the screen. Bradley was on a stretcher near the wheelhouse. Someone had covered him with a foil emergency blanket. His chest was moving slow and steady, which I kept checking on. I'd checked on it maybe a dozen times since we got back on deck. The slits on his neck had closed up by then, or mostly closed. They looked like thin scars now. I didn't mention that to anyone. I figured Lexi had already seen them. The helicopter came in from the north at around 6:40. Navy markings, no windows on the side doors. It hovered over the stern and dropped a cable, and 2 guys in flight suits came down it like they'd done this before, which they probably had. They didn't introduce themselves, didn't ask for my name, didn't ask for a single thing. They checked Bradley's vitals with a handheld unit, exchanged a look, and then started strapping the stretcher to the cable mount. One of them took the pressure case from where Lexi had set it near the cooler. He just picked it up and tucked it under his arm like a laptop bag. I watched them take Bradley up. The foil blanket caught the rotor wash and crinkled loud. His arm slid out from under it and just hung there, and one of the flight suit guys tucked it back in without breaking stride. They were efficient. That's the word for it. The helicopter banked east and was gone in about 90 seconds. Leo had stopped coiling the cable. He was just standing there, watching the sky where it had been. Then he went back to the cable. Lexi came over with a folder. Actual paper. Manila. The kind with the metal clasp at the top. She pulled out 2 sheets and held them toward me. "New NDA," she said. "Sign both copies." My hands were shaking. I noticed that when I took the pen she held out. Not a lot, just enough that my signature was going to look a little rough. I read the first paragraph. It was the same kind of language as the first one, all party of the first part and disclosure of confidential information. But there was a line near the bottom about operational incidents during the performance of contracted services. That was the new part. "Operational incidents," I said. "Sign it, Lewis." I signed it. Both copies. My name looked like I'd written it on a moving bus. She took one copy and put it back in the folder. The other one she folded and put in her jacket pocket. Then she reached up and took hold of my badge lanyard, the Curtin Maritime ID I'd been wearing since the dock in San Diego, and just clipped it off with a small pair of scissors she had in her other hand. Like she'd been planning to do that the whole time. She put the lanyard and the badge in a small Ziploc bag and sealed it and wrote something on the bag with a Sharpie. I didn't read what she wrote. "That's evidence?" I said. "That's protocol," she said. I didn't have a follow-up for that. I just sat back down on the gear locker. She went back to her laptop. Leo finished with the cables. The Pacific Provider turned around and headed back toward Point Loma. I went inside and sat in the galley and drank 2 cups of bad coffee and stared at the table. There was a magazine on the bench seat across from me, some boating trade publication from 8 months ago. I read an article about anti-fouling paint systems for aluminum hulls. I didn't retain any of it. I just needed something to look at. We docked at 11:30. Nobody said goodbye to me. Leo nodded from across the deck. That was it. The week after, I stayed in my apartment in Long Beach and didn't do much. I had a bruise across my sternum the size and shape of a license plate from the shockwave, and it went through a whole color progression over about 6 days, yellow-green to purple to brown. I took Advil and watched a lot of television and ordered delivery from a Thai place on Anaheim Street. I slept badly. Not nightmares exactly, just light sleep. The kind where you wake up at 3 in the morning and you're completely awake and you know you're not going back under for a while. I thought about Bradley some. I didn't have a number for him or any way to check on him. I thought about calling Curtin's main office and asking, but I figured that was probably covered somewhere in the NDA. I didn't call. On the 8th day, I got a direct deposit notification from Curtin Maritime. The amount was about 40% more than my contracted rate for the job. No note, no explanation in the memo line. Just the number sitting there in my bank account. An hour after that, I got an email from HR. It said I was being removed from active dive scheduling for medical reasons, and that my case had been referred to their occupational health program. There was a number to call if I had questions. I didn't call it. I sat with that for a while. Then I started looking at places to rent near Riverside. I found a 1-bedroom in a town called Norco off Hamner Avenue, near the feed stores and the horse properties. It smelled like alfalfa on the mornings the wind came from the east. I didn't mind that. I moved in with a truck I rented from U-Haul in 3 trips. The place had a concrete patio out back with a broken Weber grill that the previous tenant had left. I figured I'd deal with it eventually. I stopped answering unknown numbers. There were a few in the first couple weeks. Different area codes, nothing I recognized. I let them go to voicemail. None of them left messages. After a while, they stopped. My dive fins were in a mesh bag in the closet. The jelly stain was still on the right fin, on the blade near the tip. I checked it maybe once a week at first, then less. It didn't spread. It didn't change color or texture. It just stayed there. A smear about the size of a $50, slightly tacky if you pressed your thumb to it, which I stopped doing after the second time. I thought about throwing the fins out. I thought about it a few times. I still have them. I don't dive anymore. I've got my certifications, my hours, 8 years of log entries in a binder in the closet next to the fins. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with any of it. Probably nothing for a while. Bradley never woke up. I found that out 4 months later, not through Curtin, just through a guy I used to work with in Long Beach who knew someone who knew someone. He said Bradley was in a care facility somewhere in San Diego County, breathing on his own, no brain activity they could measure. That's what the guy told me. I don't know if it's accurate, it's the only information I have. I think about the tags sometimes, the ones I saw spinning in there, each one stamped with a name and an employee number. I don't know how long that ring had been down there, or how many names were on those tags. I didn't count. I didn't have time to count. I don't know what it was. I've thought about it enough that I've stopped expecting to figure it out. It was what it was. I saw what I saw. The alfalfa smell is pretty good in the mornings. I've got a coffee maker that works and a chair on the patio, and most days that's enough. The Weber grill is still broken. I'll get to it.